Lawrence Peter Yogi Berra. Just hearing that name brings a smile to any baseball fan's face. Sure, we all know the famous quotes and the lovable personality, but behind those malapropisms and that gentle humor was perhaps the greatest catcher who ever lived. This was a man who turned the most demanding position in baseball into an art form, a player who could call a game like a chess master and deliver clutch home runs like a born slugger. The stocky kid from St. Louis who became the heart and soul of the greatest dynasty in sports history. Today, we're going to explore just how insanely good Yogi Berra actually was. We all remember the Yogi-isms, don't we? It ain't over till it's over. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. You can observe a lot by watching. We remember that lovable cartoon character who shared his name, and the warm grandfatherly figure who seemed to embody everything pure about America's pastime. But here's the thing. As legend melts into caricature over the years, we can lose sight of what Yogi Berra truly accomplished during his playing days. And let me tell you, those accomplishments were absolutely staggering. Let's start with the numbers that'll blow your mind. 10 World Series championships as a player. 10. That's more than any other player in baseball history. 3 MVP awards, 18 All-Star selections, 358 home runs from the catcher position, a .285 lifetime batting average with incredible clutch hitting. But beyond those statistics was something even more remarkable, a baseball intellect so sharp that opposing teams feared his game-calling ability more than his bat. That's right, they were more afraid of his brain than his swing. We may remember the highlights, like the time he called Don Larson's perfect game in the 1956 World Series.
64,517 have seen it. Millions more on television. Don Larson pitches a perfect game.
But we often forget the incredible journey. How does a kid who quit school in the 8th grade become the smartest player on the field? How does he transform from an awkward minor leaguer into the anchor of the greatest team in baseball history? This is the story of how Yogi Berra went from the Hill neighborhood of St. Louis to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Now, despite his incredible success, Yogi did have some limitations. He was never the fastest runner. He struck out more than he should have early in his career, and his unorthodox swing made traditionalists absolutely cringe. So the question is, how great was Yogi Berra, really? And is he actually the greatest catcher of all time? To answer that, we need to start at the beginning with his humble origins and those natural instincts for the game. Yogi Berra was supposed to be ordinary. Born in 1925 in the Italian-American Hill neighborhood of St. Louis, nobody expected greatness from Lawrence Peter Berra. His father, Pietro, worked in a brickyard. His mother, Paulina, kept house and raised 5 children in a tiny 2-bedroom home. Money was tight, and baseball seemed like nothing more than a distant dream. But the Berras had something special, athletic ability, and an incredible work ethic that ran in the family. Young Larry, nobody called him Yogi yet, was short and stocky, built more like a fire hydrant than a professional athlete. He quit school after 8th grade to help support his family, working various jobs while playing sandlot baseball in the afternoons. His swing was unorthodox, his stance awkward, but man, could that kid hit. And more importantly, he had an intuitive understanding of the game that simply couldn't be taught. In 1943, both Yogi and his neighborhood friend Joe Garagiola were offered contracts by major league teams. Joe signed with the Cardinals for $500. But Yogi, he held out for more money from the Yankees and got it. $500 plus a $90 monthly salary. Looking back, it was probably the best investment the Yankees ever made. After serving in the Navy during World War II, where he actually participated in the D-Day landings, Yogi returned to baseball with a new nickname. A teammate said he sat like a Hindu yogi, and the name stuck forever. Larry Berra had become Yogi Berra. When Yogi made his major league debut in 1946, he was still rough around the edges. He played outfield more than catcher initially, and his defensive skills definitely needed work. His batting average was decent at .280, but he struck out too much and chased bad pitches. However, manager Casey Stengel saw something special in this young player. Not just his hitting ability, but his incredible baseball intelligence. That kid sees everything. Stengel said. He knows what's going to happen before it happens. You can't teach that kind of instinct. The transformation of Yogi Berra from adequate player to absolute superstar began when he fully committed to catching. Working with veteran catchers and coaches, he developed into a defensive master. That squat, compact build was perfectly suited for the position. He could block pitches in the dirt, had a surprisingly strong arm despite his stocky frame, and most importantly, he could call a game like a field general. Pitchers absolutely loved throwing to Yogi because he made them better. He studied opposing hitters obsessively, remembering their weaknesses and tendencies like a computer database. Yogi knew every hitter in the league better than they knew themselves, said teammate Whitey Ford. He'd set them up 3 pitches ahead of time. But here's what truly set Yogi apart from other catchers: his hitting. While most catchers were valued primarily for their defense, Yogi was a legitimate offensive threat. That unorthodox approach at the plate, swinging at bad balls and somehow making contact, drove pitching coaches absolutely crazy, but it produced incredible results. Ted Williams himself marveled at this ability. He could hit a ball off his shoelaces or over his head for a double. Bad pitches, good pitches, it didn't matter. If you threw it anywhere near the plate, Yogi could hurt you. His clutch hitting was the stuff of legends. In pressure situations, when the game was on the line, Yogi seemed to elevate his performance to another level entirely. Starting in 1947, Yogi became the cornerstone of the greatest dynasty in professional sports history. The Yankees won the World Series that year, with Yogi hitting .280 and providing steady defense behind the plate. But this was just the beginning of something unprecedented. From 1947 to 1962, Yogi's Yankees appeared in 14 World Series and won 10 of them. Think about that for a moment. No other player in any sport has been part of more championship teams. But this wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. Yogi was often the catalyst for their success. Yogi's peak years came in the early 1950s when he won 3 consecutive MVP awards from 1951 to 53. This is a feat matched by very few players in baseball history. In 1951, he hit .294 with 27 home runs and 88 RBIs, while calling one of the best pitching staffs in baseball history. The following year, he improved to .273 with 30 home runs and 98 RBIs. But it was his 1954 season that truly showcased his evolved abilities. Despite losing the MVP award that year, Yogi hit .307 with 22 home runs and, get this, just 29 strikeouts in 151 games. 29 strikeouts for an entire season. His plate discipline had evolved from wild swinging to calculated aggression. October 8, 1956. Game 5 of the World Series against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Don Larson was on the mound for the Yankees, and Yogi was behind the plate. As the game progressed and Larson retired batter after batter, the pressure mounted. A perfect game had never been thrown in World Series history. Yogi's game calling that day was absolutely masterful. He mixed Larson's pitches perfectly, keeping the Dodgers completely off balance. When Dale Mitchell struck out swinging for the final out, Yogi leaped into Larson's arms in one of the most iconic images in baseball history. But here's the thing, it wasn't just Larson's perfect game, it was Yogi's perfect game-calling performance. What made Yogi truly special wasn't just his individual accomplishments, but how he made everyone around him better. Pitchers' ERAs typically dropped when throwing to Yogi. His game calling was so sophisticated that opposing managers would study his signs and positioning to try to gain insights into his strategy. Catching with Yogi was like having a hitting coach behind the plate, said pitcher Bob Turley. He knew what you could do better than you did, and he wasn't afraid to call for pitches that pushed your limits. His leadership was quiet, but incredibly effective. He never yelled or berated teammates, but his work ethic and professionalism set the standard for the entire organization. Beneath that gentle exterior was a fierce competitor who absolutely hated to lose. Yogi's intensity showed most during the World Series, where he seemed to raise his game to match the moment. He holds numerous World Series records: most games played, most hits, most at-bats, and most times on a winning team. His 1960 World Series against Pittsburgh perfectly exemplified this competitive nature. Despite the Yankees losing in 7 games, Yogi had 8 RBIs and hit .318. Even in defeat, he was magnificent. What truly separated Yogi from other catchers was his incredible baseball intelligence. Despite quitting school in 8th grade, he was absolutely brilliant when it came to understanding the game. He could read opposing pitchers' strategies, anticipate hit-and-run situations, and position his fielders better than most coaches. Yogi was like having an extra coach on the field, said shortstop Phil Rizzuto. He saw things developing before anyone else. He'd move you 2 steps to the left, and sure enough, that's exactly where the ball would be hit. His famous malapropisms, while entertaining, sometimes obscured just how sharp his baseball mind truly was. Yogi's ability to handle pitchers was legendary throughout the league. He worked with some of the greatest pitchers in Yankees history: Whitey Ford, Allie Reynolds, Vic Raschke, Eddie Lopat, and made all of them better. His approach was to study each pitcher's strength and tendencies, then call games that maximized their effectiveness. Yogi knew my stuff better than I did, said Whitey Ford. He'd call for pitches I didn't even know I had in me. He never called the same game twice because he understood that baseball is about constant adjustment. Even opposing pitchers respected his game-calling abilities, often seeking him out for advice during their careers. So how does Yogi stack up against other great catchers? Johnny Bench had a stronger arm and more home run power. Roy Campanella was more athletic. Gary Carter had better longevity. But nobody, and I mean nobody, combined offensive production, defensive excellence, game-calling ability, and championship success like Yogi Berra. His 10 World Series championships as a player is a record that will never be broken. His 3 MVP awards from the catcher position is matched only by Bench. But beyond the numbers was something intangible, a baseball intelligence and clutch performance ability that elevated him above all others. When we analyze Yogi's career, we see a player who revolutionized the catcher position. Before Yogi, catchers were primarily valued for their defense. He proved that a catcher could be an offensive force while maintaining excellence behind the plate. He showed that baseball intelligence was more valuable than raw physical ability. Beyond baseball, Yogi became a cultural icon whose influence extended far beyond the sport. His famous sayings became a part of American folklore, but beneath that folksy exterior was always the sharp baseball mind that had made him great. In the end, Yogi Berra represents everything great about baseball: intelligence, clutch performance, team success, and the ability to make everyone around him better. While others may have better individual statistics in certain categories, nobody combined all aspects of catching, offense, defense, game calling, and leadership quite like Yogi Berra. He wasn't just the greatest catcher in baseball history. He was one of the greatest players the game has ever seen. The kid from the hill in St. Louis, who became the heart and soul of the most successful franchise in sports history. So the next time someone mentions Yogi Berra, don't just think about the funny quotes or the cartoon bear. Think about 10 World Series rings. Think about 3 MVP awards. Think about a baseball genius who changed the game forever. That's how insanely good Yogi Berra actually was. Thanks for watching this deep dive into Yogi's incredible career. If you enjoyed learning about how truly dominant he was, smash that like button. Let me know in the comments what you think about his legacy. Subscribe for more legendary baseball stories every week, and I'll see you in the next one.